If we don't act swiftly and decisively, we will come to regret it. Additionally, we are now facing a crisis on the southern border that should have and could have been avoided. Through irresponsible rhetoric and actions by this administration, we are seeing an unprecedented crisis unfold during a pandemic. The situation at the border continues to get worse every day with inadequate action or even proper acknowledgement of the severity of the situation. I just returned from the border where I started my career as a federal organized crime prosecutor in the mid-90s, and I can tell you without hesitation that it is indeed a crisis that continues to deepen each and every day. One thing that deeply disturbed me was a number of children being encountered along the border, exposed to the elements and having experienced a dangerous, traumatic journey from their home countries. As we quickly approach peak levels of unaccompanied children crossing the border, I'm very concerned that the administration's rhetoric and policies are encouraging more to attempt this dangerous journey. There's just no question about that based on my conversations with the Customs and Border Patrol agents and other experts along the border. Mr. Secretary, as I said during our phone call a few weeks ago, and again yesterday, I want to find ways to work together with you and to keep the homeland safe. It's not about who gets credit or blame. It's about doing the right thing for America. I also told you that I would be frank and transparent with you when I believe that the department and administration is not living up to its end of the bargain. Regrettably, that is where we find ourselves today. I'm deeply concerned that this administration has created a border crisis through predictably misguided policies and executive orders, denied the reality of the situation, and dodged accountability. At the same time that American schools remain closed across the country, the United States border is open to foreign nationals. After taking office, President Biden wasted no time. In fact, one of his first acts was to pull out his pen and unravel our border security and immigration enforcement posture by, among other things, halting construction of the border wall system, which the Customs and Border Patrol agent says works, implementing selective enforcement of our immigration laws, ending the Remain in Mexico policy, allowing the entry of thousands of migrants waiting in Mexico into the country, re-implementing catch and release, and canceling the asylum cooperative agreements with Central American partners. It's no wonder we have this issue we have at the border. While the president's overdue message yesterday to migrants to not make the journey to our southern border is certainly better late than never, words alone cannot undo the impact of his policies. The statistics simply do not lie about the impact of these policies. In February 2021, Customs and Border Patrol encounters the highest number of migrants recorded in the month of February in over 7 years, 100,441 people. A whopping 173% increase compared to February 2020. A 163% increase in family units from January 2021. A 61% increase in unaccompanied children from January 2021. Customs and Border Patrol officials are projecting a peak of 13,000 unaccompanied children crossing the border per month by May, which would exceed unaccompanied children encounters at the height of the 2019 crisis. And just as an aside, at the Border Patrol facility that houses young unaccompanied children in El Paso, they're already over capacity, and we have more coming. Hundreds of Border Patrol agents are being diverted from interior drug checkpoints and the northern and coastal borders to respond to this surge. DHS has asked for volunteers to help manage the overwhelming number of migrants at the border. And FEMA has been taken away from, some members of FEMA have been taken away from dealing with the pandemic and vaccinating Americans to deal with the crisis. We are clearly in the midst of a humanitarian, security, and public health crisis that the administration refuses to acknowledge and is not being transparent about. This is also a crisis that has to be costing millions of dollars a day, and I expect more specificity from the department in the weeks ahead on the exact magnitude of this preventable financial burden. I know from going to the border this week that Customs and Border Patrol agents have told me that they're taking money from future payments for Customs and Border Patrol agents later this year, and that if there's not a supplemental, they won't have money at the end of the year to pay their agents. That's how bad it is. Mr. Secretary, going back to the beginning of my statement, I do not want to simply throw stones. I just don't. I would sincerely like to work with you and the administration on this issue and come to the table with solutions. Today, I would like to propose several measures the administration can take in short order to get this crisis under control. We can restart already appropriated wall funding. There's nothing more bipartisan than keeping our country safe, and the Customs and Border Patrol agents are screaming for this. And strong border security is part of that. Reimpose the Remain in Mexico policy, end catch and release, and protect Title 42 authorities. Listen to our frontline workers and continue to invest in more barriers, technology, access roads, and resources for personnel. And work with our foreign partners once again to prevent more migrants from reaching our border in the first place. And prioritize the need to test and vaccinate the frontline Customs and Border Patrol and the ICE workforce. Help me finalize legislation to follow a Homeland Security Advisory Council recommendation to create a trust fund for border surges so we can deal with them in a more timely manner. I sincerely hope that despite the rhetoric, the administration has taken this crisis seriously and that we can work together to find solutions that are good for the country. I really sincerely mean that, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Secretary. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you again for holding this hearing. I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses, and with that, I yield back.
Other members of the committee are reminded that under the committee rules, opening statements may be submitted for the record. Members are also reminded that the committee will operate according to the guidelines laid out by the chairman and ranking member in our February 3rd colloquy regarding remote procedures. Without objection, the witness's full statement will be inserted in the record. I now recognize Secretary Mayorkas for his opening statement.
Thank you and good morning. Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Katko, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to join you today. At the very outset, I should recognize the tragic event that took place in the surrounding areas of Atlanta yesterday. Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of that tragic event, those who lost their lives, as well as those who were injured. We are tracking that event very carefully. I have already been briefed on it, and I know that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is working underway to understand all of the facts, and that the individual who is a suspect of that event is in custody. More than 240,000 individuals dedicate their talent and energy each day to protecting our homeland security. It is an honor to appear before you to represent them and the critical work they perform in the service of the American people. DHS personnel protect our country from foreign and domestic terrorism while also protecting our privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. They secure and manage our borders while also restoring America as a place of refuge. They support a whole-of-government effort to defeat a pandemic that has impacted every part of American life while also facilitating the legitimate trade and travel needed for a strong economy. The challenges we face are great, but we do not face them alone. The Department of Homeland Security is fundamentally a department of partnerships. Congress, all of you, is one of our essential partners. I commit to working with this committee on a bipartisan basis to ensure the success of our Homeland Security mission. 43 days into my tenure as Secretary, I look forward to sharing what we have done and where we are headed. I will start with what is top of mind for every American, which is our effort to defeat the COVID-19 pandemic. On the first day of this administration, President Biden challenged FEMA to stand up 100 federally supported community vaccination centers in only 30 days. In fact, FEMA did not stand up 100 federally supported community vaccination centers in 30 days. It stood up 441. Today, that number is well over 900 and growing by the day. President Biden also challenged us to deliver 100 million vaccinations across the country in 100 days. Last week, we passed 90 million doses and are on track to reach the president's ambitious goal. Another top priority for our department is increasing the nation's cybersecurity resilience and protecting our critical infrastructure, especially in light of the recent campaigns exploiting SolarWinds and Microsoft Exchange and the growing threat of ransomware. As a first step, I have directed grant funding that will provide an additional $25 million for state and local entities across the country to improve their cybersecurity, raising the total minimum amount they must devote together to this critical mission to $77 million. The Department's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, remains laser focused on protecting and providing assistance to federal civilian agencies and working with the private sector to improve our defenses. Thank you very much to all of you for your leadership in recognizing the importance of this issue and for the $650 million you recently appropriated for CISA to enhance our ability to protect the nation against cyber attacks. As the United States approaches the 20th anniversary of 9/11, we face a threat landscape that has significantly evolved. While we remain vigilant about the threat of foreign terrorism, ideologically motivated domestic violent extremism now poses the most lethal and persistent terrorism-related threat to the homeland today. The January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol and on American democracy is a searing example of this threat. With our federal partners and our own offices of intelligence and analysis, civil rights and civil liberties, and privacy, we are working to assess the linkage between extremists' exploitation of social media and their acts of violence. We are expanding our intelligence and information sharing capabilities, again consistent with privacy rights, and civil liberties as part of a whole of government effort to combat domestic violent extremism. We are also equipping local communities with the tools to better address this threat. This year, and for the first time, I directed our Homeland Security grant programs to make domestic violent extremism a national priority area, requiring recipients to spend at least 7.5% of their grant awards on combating domestic violent extremism. Across the nation, this year, states and urban areas will spend at least $77 million to prevent, prepare for, protect against, and respond to acts of domestic violent extremism. There is, of course, a great deal of attention focused on the southwest border, where we are experiencing a surge of individuals attempting to cross the border. Most are single adults who are expelled within hours back to Mexico pursuant to the CDC's public health authority. Families who are apprehended at the border are also immediately expelled under the same public health authority unless we confront at times a limitation on Mexico's capacity to receive them. We are also encountering many unaccompanied children, children who arrive without a parent or legal guardian with them. Their families made the heart-wrenching decision to send them on a journey across Mexico to provide them with a better, safer future. The previous administration was expelling these unaccompanied children, some who are girls under the age of 12, for example, back to Mexico. We ended that practice. Unaccompanied children can make their claims for humanitarian relief in immigration proceedings, as the law provides. If it is determined that they do not have a valid claim, they will be returned in a safe manner. We have taken a series of actions to address the increase in the number of unaccompanied children at the border. We have increased our capacity to hold the children until HHS can shelter them while it identifies and vets the children's sponsors. We are increasing HHS's capacity, and I directed FEMA to support this effort. We have instituted the safe, orderly, and legal pathway for children's asylum claims to be heard, so that they do not have to take the dangerous journey to our border. That pathway, the Central American Minors Program, was torn down by the prior administration. These actions, and more that we are taking, are part of our plan to manage the arrival of individuals at our southwest border. The situation is undoubtedly difficult. We are working around the clock to manage it, and it will take time, but we will not waver in our commitment to succeed. That is our job. We will also not waver in our values and our principles as a nation. In the Department of Homeland Security, we can and we will tackle the many challenges we face while complying with our legal obligations and honoring our nation's values and principles. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today and for your support of our department. I look forward to working with you and to taking your questions. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary for his testimony. I remind each member that he or she will have 5 minutes to question the witness. I now recognize myself for questions. Mr. Secretary, The majority of this committee was here on January 6th when the insurrection occurred. You were not secretary, but you have had a chance to, I'm sure, review some of the reports that have been generated. Can you tell us, in your review of what occurred and what led up to the January 6th insurrection, are you reviewing that process right now?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your question. I just want to start on a personal note. I was brought to this country by my parents because of everything that the Capitol represents to the American people, and because of everything that all of you on this committee do, which is serve and represent the American people. We came because of the democracy we cherish. And what occurred on January 6th was heartbreaking, and I know some of you experienced it personally in great fear. I certainly am reviewing the events that led up to that horrible day. I'm also mindful of the fact that there are criminal investigations underway to address individuals who broke the law and perpetrated the crimes of January 6th. And so I conduct my review and I receive my briefings mindful of the sensitivities of pending criminal investigations and prosecutions. It is very much a focus of the Department of Homeland Security, of mine personally. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, domestic violent extremism is one of the gravest and most persistent threats that we as a country face, and we are fully engaged in addressing it.
Thank you very much. Since we will probably hear a lot of discussion about the border, what's the status of children who are separated from their parents on the border?
Mr. Chairman, the children who were separated from their parents under the Trump administration are the subject of an intense effort and an all-of-government effort directed by President Biden to find the parents and reunite the families and restore our nation to its core principles and values. We appointed an incredibly talented and dedicated executive director, Michelle Barnett, to lead the task force. I am the chair, along with the Secretaries of State, Health and Human Services, and the Attorney General of the United States. This is a full-time effort by talented and dedicated individuals, not only in the Department of Homeland Security, but in the other departments that I mentioned. We look forward to working with this committee, with other members of Congress, and harnessing the talent and resources of the private sector and community-based organizations in this effort. We have an obligation to find the parents and to reunite those families.
Thank you very much. Earlier this month, while visiting a FEMA vaccination center in Philadelphia, you expressed the view that a person's socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, access to transportation, or immigration status should not impact their ability to receive a vaccine. I could not agree with you anymore. Can you share with the committee how you are making that a reality?
Mr. Chairman, the issue of equity is a core foundation of the all-of-government effort to address and tackle the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. FEMA uses a social vulnerability index that addresses the vulnerabilities that you identify in ensuring that the placement of the community vaccination centers address the issue of equity and equality of access to the vaccines. I will share with you that I participate, along with other cabinet members, in a weekly meeting led by Jeffrey Zients who leads the all-of-government effort on behalf of President Biden. And the issue of equity and the emphasis on equity begins our discussions every week. It is uppermost in our minds, and that too is a core obligation of ours.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Katko, for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for the way you've been accessible, and they've reached out to me several times. We've had several good discussions already, and I appreciate us getting off on the right foot. And I want to commend all the men and women at the Department of Homeland Security and all the subsidiary agencies for the great work they do every day. I encountered many of those this weekend in El Paso, where I started my career as a prosecutor and where I went after cartels. And I know from then and I know now that they're the frontline people, they're the frontline workers, and what the discussions you have with them really ring true. And after discussing things with them, I became that much more alarmed about what's going on at the border. And as we discussed yesterday in our phone call, I've got a series of questions that really require just a yes or no answer. And I would appreciate if you could just go through those quickly. If you could confirm some of these for me. First of all, do you agree that President Biden signed multiple executive actions on his first day in office to one, halt border wall construction, two, end the Remain in Mexico policy, and three, cancel asylum agreements with Central American partners?
I do, and if I may, Mr. Ranking Member, I appreciated our two conversations thus far and the spirit of partnership to which we are both committed. I share your background as a federal prosecutor, and I know we will accomplish a great deal together. May I just say one quick thing about the men and women?
Sir, if you can, but it can be very brief because I have several questions.
I will, because I share your tremendous pride in the men and women of the Border Patrol and in the men and women across the Department of Homeland Security. When I took office on February 2nd, 2% of the frontline Border Patrol personnel had been vaccinated. And what I heard, first and foremost, was the fact that their health and well-being had not been taken care of. We launched Operation VOW, Vaccinate Our Workforce, and over 26% of the frontline personnel are now vaccinated. And I know
Thank
that
you, Mr. Secretary. I don't mean to cut you off, but I do have many questions. I do appreciate you taking care of the agents. That's very commendable. Also, do you agree that Customs and Border Patrol encountered protection encountered more than 100,000 individuals in February, which was a 173% increase from February 2020? Just yes or no?
The numbers with respect to February of this year are accurate, Mr. Ranking Member.
Thank you.
And 2020 is not the...
Can you confirm that Customs and Border Protection's Donna facility was recently at over 700% capacity?
I don't have the precise figure. It was certainly over capacity, Mr. Ranking Member, and we are addressing that.
Thank you. Can you confirm that Homeland Security has asked for volunteers to help manage the, quote, overwhelming, end quote, number of migrants at the border?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Mr. Ranking Member?
Sure.
Thank you.
Can you confirm that Homeland Security has asked for volunteers to help manage the, quote, overwhelming, end quote, number of migrants at the border?
We have certainly called upon the volunteer workforce to assist in managing the border, as we have done before, and we have done in many circumstances to address the varied mission of the Department of Homeland Security. I'm extraordinarily proud of our volunteers.
Can you confirm that over the weekend you directed FEMA to help receive, shelter, and transfer unaccompanied children from the southwest border?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. And FEMA was the same agency who was charged with its first nationwide disaster order in handling the pandemic and distributing vaccines?
It most certainly is, and it is extraordinarily capable in addressing the many challenges that we throughout the Department of Homeland Security and throughout the nation confront. This is not the first time that we have deployed the fantastic people of FEMA to address different challenges throughout the country.
I understand, sir. Thank you. Can you confirm that in order to pay for the response to the surge at the border, it's highly likely that you're going to need a supplemental appropriations from Congress?
That is not certain by any means, Mr. Ranking Member, and I certainly will stay in close touch with you with respect to the financial impacts of the work that we are performing, not only in this mission set, but across the department.
Okay, now a couple quick questions. if you agree with the facts that we've set out, and I appreciate your candor, and you said earlier in your testimony that the situation at the border is undoubtedly difficult. Well, given the tremendous rise and surge of individuals coming to the border, wouldn't it be fair to call it a crisis? Because that's what your agents are calling it.
Mr. Ranking Member, first of all, if I may, I didn't necessarily agree with all the statistics that you cited. Mr. Ranking Member, I'm not spending any time on the language that we use. I am spending time on operational response to the situation at the border.
Okay, just two quick questions, Mr. Chairman. I know I'm almost done
That's
here.
what I'm focused on.
Despite our disagreements and despite the language characterizations, I want to talk about solving problems. And I just want to get a commitment from you of two things. One is that you're open to working with members of Congress, regardless of whether they're Democrats or Republican, to reverse the disorder at the border.
I will be a partner of members of Congress, regardless of party.
Okay, and lastly, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence. Will you commit to encouraging the president to accept Leader McCarthy's well-intentioned invitation to discuss the border crisis? And I'd like to be there too, if I could, and how we could come together to fix it.
Mr. Ranking Member, I will defer to the president to how he believes he should conduct the meetings that he hosts.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You're back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes other members for questions they may wish to ask the witness. I'll recognize members in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority. Members are reminded to unmute themselves when recognized for questioning, and then mute themselves once they have finished speaking, and to leave their cameras on so they are visible. The chair now recognizes the young lady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so very much for your leadership. To the Secretary, it's good to see you again. We've worked together before. My time is short. My questions, I will try to be as short as possible if your answers could be likewise. I'm outraged about the shootings in Atlanta. Thank you for starting out. We offer our deepest sympathy. 6 of those individuals seem to be Asian out of 8. What is the department going to be doing about, even though the investigation is not proceeded, what may be domestic terrorism or hateful acts, violent acts against communities like Asian Americans, which have seen a surge in hateful acts? Mr. Secretary, very quickly.
Congresswoman, it's nice to see you again as well. I won't comment on the tragedy of yesterday because it is under investigation, but we are intensely focused on the greatest threat that we face in the homeland from a terrorism perspective, as I mentioned at the outset, and that is domestic violent extremism, violence that is motivated by different ideologies, including ideologies of hate against particular social groups.
I appreciate it. I hope that we will focus on Asian Americans as we have done on other groups, and certainly we know that African Americans have been the target of white supremacy and white racism. Let me move quickly to the border and indicate to you, Mr. Secretary, that this administration has a border policy. I congratulate you for it. It is not a policy of putting children in cages, which we had to suffer for year after year on the Trump administration. There are no children in cages. So I would simply ask this. I applaud the utilization of FEMA, and I applaud the utilization of a policy. Can you succinctly say what that policy is as it relates to the border?
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst. So police in Georgia say that they are not willing to label the slaughter this morning, late last night, of 8 people, 6 of them Asian women, as a hate crime. So let's say it a different way. This was a hateful crime. It's hard to look at, but we cannot look away, and we cannot settle for legalisms, cannot wait for investigations to be played out. So much of what is wrong in our world is visible in this ugly episode. Georgia State Representative Bee Wynn captured it best. She said that the shootings appear to be the, quote, intersection of gender-based violence, misogyny, and xenophobia. I would add one more point. This was workplace violence. These workplaces provide massages and often other sexual services to their customers. The workers were almost exclusively Asian women, a kind of workplace segregation we would never tolerate by most other employers. Robert Aaron Long was apparently a customer of massage parlors. He blamed the employees for his compulsion to patronize them.
The suspect did take responsibility for the shootings. He said that early on, once we began the interviews with him. He claims that these, and as the chief said, this is still early, but he does claim that it was not racially motivated. He apparently has an issue, what he considers a sex addiction, and sees these locations as something that allows him to go to these places, and it's a temptation for him that he wanted to eliminate. Like I said, it's still early on, but those were comments that he made.
This is madness, of course. It makes as much sense as an alcoholic killing a liquor store worker in retaliation for his alcoholism. But at least this rips open a conversation we needed to have for a long time. Work is work. Sex work is work. Much of sex work is segregated by race and forced underground. The most exploited in our society are also always the most vulnerable. The tragedy for these workers didn't start with their murders. It started years ago in a world of exploitation that drives them into a path that ended in their murders this morning. And maybe it doesn't even drive them into that path. A world where the police are not their protectors, but among their exploiters. The explanation the alleged killer gave to the police makes a kind of ugly sense in this world of dehumanization. He wanted to eliminate temptation, remove what he saw as a trigger to his addiction. Oh, how white supremacist of you. Given how little value we seem to hold these women in, well, sure, why not? Let's just eliminate them. Being inside the mind of a madman is not pleasant. But sometimes it is the craziest among us who see these things clearly. Hurt people hurt people. By his own account, he needed help he didn't get. Yet, 6 women are dead. 6 Asian women are dead at the hands of a white man. At a time when violence against Asians is a stain on our society. And you can see that within this logic. This was, okay, not a racial crime. That was his logic. He killed them because he believed that they were sex workers, not because they were Asian. Did Robert Aaron Long kill these women because they were Asian, or because he believed that they were sex workers, or both? Either way, we cannot evade the most damning question of all. Were they sex workers because they were Asian? Or as Kenzo Shabadi, friend of the show, put it in his newsletter today, quote, how can we say this killing spree has nothing to do with race, as the targets were part of a racialized workforce? I understand the law has to be precise to be just. Maybe racism wasn't his motive or what he says was his motive. But racism is still very much part of this crime. To truly see and correct injustice, we need more than laws against hate crimes. And in the meantime, we need to protect our most vulnerable workers. Do you guys remember that article, that damning article that came out in the New York Times a few years ago over the nail salons, of the conditions of the nail salons and how nail salon workers, Asian women in particular, were being exploited and trafficked to the United States, and they were living in the nail salons and sleeping in shifts? It was a jungle moment, as in the book, The Jungle, yet nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. It opened up a conversation, and then another crisis happened. So I ask, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about this? Because it compounds so many different issues at once. Of course, Trump was blaming this crisis on the Asian community, calling it the China virus. We've seen the horrific attacks on people, the Asian community over the last year as a result of his spiteful, hurtful, insightful words. So how can we not naturally think that this is connected to that? And even if it's not, we should at least open up the conversation to do something about it, simultaneously while talking about what it means to protect workers, all workers, not just the ones who work for big corporations, but those who are trafficked, immigrants, those who are working in inhumane working conditions, and of course, sex workers. All right, we have a wonderful show today. Jordan Zakarin is here, and our very own Simon Rode he's also here. And coming up right after the break, Lee Carter, Delegate Lee Carter, will tell us about his campaign to be governor of Virginia. I'm not wearing green, I just realized. Happy St. Patrick's Day. No parades because COVID, but guess who came through for us on COVID? Okay. Well, we need to dismantle the system of exploitation that produced this hateful crime. And yesterday we called on ex-President Trump to urge his followers to get vaccinated after half of all Republicans were polled saying that they refused or questioned the vaccine, whether they were going to take the vaccine. So last night, Trump urged his folks to get the vaccine, of course, that he's taking credit for distributing. It's a start. It is a start. All right, we'll be right back in a flash.
It's no secret that Virginia is divided, but it's not divided between red and blue. It's not divided between big cities and small towns. Virginia is divided between the haves and the have-nots. One side sends their kids to choice private schools, while the rest of us send our kids to schools that are underfunded and crumbling. One side can afford concierge service from their doctors, while we're lucky to see a doctor at all. And when COVID-19 hit, they got massive taxpayer-funded bailouts for their businesses, and we had to make do with thoughts and prayers.
The more than 760,000 Virginians left unemployed by the pandemic.
For too long, we've listened to career politicians and pundits tell us that there is no other way, but no more. In this primary, we can finally pick a governor that will fight for the rest of us, for the teachers and nurses, for shipbuilders and students struggling to make tuition, for everyone with a stack of bills on the kitchen table waiting to get paid. I'm running for governor so the rest of us can finally get what we need. We have had enough! So we can get what we deserve. I'm Lee Carter, candidate for governor, and I approve this message. Because a vote for me is a vote for the rest of us.
Welcome back to the Nomiki Show, and welcome back, Delegate Carter. Lee Carter is, of course, he represents the 50th District in the Virginia House of Delegates, and he is running for governor of Virginia. So great that we finally got you on. I was so thrilled when you announced. I was like, we need him on immediately.
Thank you so much for having me. How you doing today?
Doing wonder, as great as you can be in the midst of this chaos.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, Virginia's got like such a strange system to me. I feel. Can you explain just how this gubernatorial race is playing out? Like who's in it? Just sort of the logistics before we get to your candidacy.
Yeah. So first of all, Virginia is one of only 2 states that has major elections in odd numbered years, which is a voter suppression tactic. Conservatives long ago knew that if they got their elections out of sync with the federal elections, that fewer people would vote in them. So that's one of the things that makes this odd, is that it's just us that has a competitive gubernatorial election. But the field right now, so we have a very crowded Democratic primary. You have me, obviously, and then you have former Governor Terry McAuliffe, which he's running for a non-consecutive term. Another weird thing about Virginia is that our governors are limited to only 1 term at a time. You can have as many terms as you want, but none of them can be back to back. And so he's running to be only the 2nd governor ever to get a 2nd term. The first was actually a segregationist named Mills Godwin. So we've got former Governor McAuliffe running. We have a longtime member of the state Senate, Senator Jennifer McClellan, running. We have a former delegate who got elected in 2017 with me, former delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy, and we have the current Lieutenant Governor, Justin Fairfax, all running for governor. So it's a very, very crowded field on the Democratic side. There's even more chaos on the Republican side that I can get into if you want to give me time.
This is the junkie show, so yes, please.
So on the Republican side, first of all, they've had a hard time even picking their nominating method. What do you mean by that? So the parties are allowed to choose their nominating method. And the Democrats have chosen a state-run primary. Mm-hmm. The Republicans were trying to have a convention, and then they were told that they were not allowed to have a convention because of COVID restrictions. So they decided to have what's called an unassembled caucus, which is where there's essentially just one voting site. And they were trying to do that at a university in Lynchburg, but they didn't ask the university first. And so then that plan got rejected, and now they've got this weird hybrid unassembled caucus with 30 or 40 some odd voting sites, which is still far too few for a Commonwealth of 8.5 million people. But they have a crowded field over there as well. They have a former Speaker of the House running for governor. Their front runner is actually someone who describes herself as Trump in heels. And she, took part in the insurrection on January 6th and I had to ask the Attorney General whether or not she was even qualified to serve in office under the 14th Amendment. And he basically said, well, that's up to the courts.
So she's being investigated right now?
I'd be shocked if she wasn't under criminal investigation for it. I mean, she had members of her personal bodyguard that were arrested for their actions at the Capitol. They were arrested for their actions at the Capitol while out on bail after being arrested interfering with vote counts in Pennsylvania. It is just absolutely wild what's going on here in Virginia. And it's a complete free-for-all.
Is the situation on the Republican side an indication of the state of Virginia in terms of red versus blue? I mean, if the leader of the Republican side is a Trump person, whereas, you know, that's probably not going to win the group. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I mean, I'm thinking like for folks who aren't aware, Northern Virginia is very much like the Washington outskirts. It's the Beltway. And so those folks aren't going to vote for Trump. They're more likely to vote for the Democratic nominee or Trump's person in heels. I mean, is this sort of an indicator of like a failing Republican Party in Virginia and maybe even nationally?
Well, you know, their last nominee for U.S. Senate was a guy named Corey Stewart, who was best known for his racist policies in Prince William County, which, you know, half of my district is in Prince William County. But he also, a lot of people don't realize this, he was sort of the crystal that everything coalesced around in Charlottesville leading up to the Nazi attack.
Wow.
He was going down and holding these torchlight rallies in Charlottesville around that monument of Robert E. Lee in you know, April, May, June of 2017. And then there was the big Nazi attack in August, which had the same method and just much larger attendance. And so, you know, the Republican Party of Virginia has been off the rails for a while. They have not won a statewide election since 2009.
Oh, wow.
And their frankly, their chances of ever winning a statewide election again are very, very low, barring some sort of massive political realignment. The problem is that we're overdue for a massive political realignment here in Virginia. And you'll have to excuse the train sounds. I live in Manassas. It's a railway town. I don't know if you can hear the horn or not.
we love the trains. It's all good.
But so, you know, Virginia's political history is one where you have this very ossified status quo, right? Where nothing changes for decades and decades and decades. And then all of a sudden there's a clean break, right? There's this massive surge of you know, backlash against the status quo. And sometimes it goes in very positive directions, like with the readjuster movement, with, you know, the candidacy of Henry Howell, who was a lieutenant governor for 2 years and ran for governor 3 times and almost won. He actually almost won against Mills Godwin, the segregationist that I was talking about earlier. And sometimes it goes in very negative ways, like Mills Godwin.
Right.
And you know, those two things tend to bubble up at the same exact time, and you get elections where you're competing against, you know, a positive populism of people that want to do the people's work and you know, break from the good old boys network and you know, make the Commonwealth more small d democratic and make our economy work for more people. And you also get this sort of negative populism where it's all about scapegoats and racism and, you know, this person is the cause of all your problems. And we're in that kind of moment right now. And my concern with this election is that, you know, the Democratic Party nationally and in Virginia in particular seems ill-suited to deal with that kind of negative populism coming from the other side. And so, you know, we can suppress it for a few elections, but eventually that dissatisfaction will bubble over, and we have to either give people a positive creative outlet for that populist energy and return the Commonwealth to a government of, by, and for the people, or deal with the violent, horrifying, racist consequences of not, you know, providing that constructive outlet. that's really the consequence of this election on both sides.
You know, it's interesting because you do have these elections in off years, and you were elected in an off year. And I remember when, you made major news. It was very.
Wasn't trying to.
It was good though. It was good because I think you were the first, at least nationally recognized DSA member elected after the primary, the presidential primary, of course, in 2016.
Yeah. And I was the first socialist elected to any office in Virginia in over 100 years.
That's amazing.
From my research, the last time I was able to find a socialist elected to any office was the mayor of Brookneal, Virginia, which had a population of like 900, and it was in 1916. So,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Quite a revival. But because of that, there's an opportunity, without giving away a playbook to your opponents, there's an opportunity when there is low turnout for people to organize and not rely, solely on, it does help sometimes, on mass media. And if you have that kind of integrated campaign model, which you clearly did, and I'm sure you're doing now, it feeds well with these populist movements, right? So, I'm looking at someone like a Terry McAuliffe, who, very charming guy. I've had drinks with him before. I'm sure you have too, or been around it. Very, very charming guy. He's definitely representative of the establishment. But my guess is he's probably going to rely on that like big statewide model that's less rooted in communities. So is this, sort of there's an opportunity here, given that there is going to be low turnout, for someone like yourself to just really come in and fight to win. Right? Is that kind of how you're looking at it?
And, I don't mind playing with my cards face up, right? So I'll just go ahead and talk about what we're going to be doing. Unlike the rest of the field, I understand that you're never going to raise more money than Terry McAuliffe. This is a guy who is personally tight with the Clinton family. This is a guy who his entire, the entire base of his power within the Democratic Party is that he raises a lot of money from massive corporations. Mm-hmm. And so if I were to come up with $10 million, he'd spend 20. If I came up with $100 million, he'd spend 200 million.
Right.
There's absolutely no way to outraise this guy. He has essentially unlimited money. The rest of the field is trying to play the big money game with him. And frankly, that's doomed to failure because it's his game. He will always win it. And so my strategy is not to try to raise more money than Terry McAuliffe. It's never going to happen. My strategy is to raise just enough money to get the word out there and to walk the walk and say, I'm fighting for the issues that you actually care about. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about them in a way that you're not used to hearing politicians talk about them, because it's not poll tested. It's not run through consultants. It's just me talking about the things that I want out of the Commonwealth. And that I'm going to fight for them. That I'm actually going to follow through because A, I have a record of doing just that. Damn the consequences. And B, my entire political career, I've never taken a single dime from any for-profit corporation or industry interest group. And I never will. Mm-hmm. And in a state with unlimited campaign contributions where
unreal. I can't believe that. Just let's pause for a second, digest that. Unlimited campaign. How is that possible?
Well, there's only 6 states that do it this way.
Pennsylvania is one, right?
I don't remember the other 5. Yeah, I've been focused on this one.
That's good.
But, we had perfect example of this in 2019. There was a member of the House of Delegates, a libertarian right-winger who didn't turn his paperwork in on time for re-election and had to run a write-in campaign. But he funded his entire re-election campaign with a single check from an Illinois casino owner for $500,000.
Oh my God.
One check.
Unreal.
And there's no prohibition on corporations giving directly to candidates. The only thing that they're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to accept contributions from foreign sources. But
okay.
But if a federal law, but if a multinational corporation has a U.S. subsidiary that's just a post office box in Delaware, that's fine, as long as it has the address in Delaware on it. Who cares, right?
Does that have anything to do with
rules?
Does that have anything to do with the fact that like there's so much military present? I mean, I'm just trying to think of like military personnel. Obviously, the U.S. government has different offices situated in Virginia. I mean, does that have anything to do with the military industrial complex? No.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we're allowed to receive contributions from American citizens living abroad. We're allowed to receive contributions from green card holders that live here in the States. So I've gotten donations from people that are American citizens that live in Singapore or the Czech Republic or that have an APO or FPO address. So I don't really think that has anything to do with it. It's just that, Virginia's political class is just so tightly wound up with the business class in Virginia that they're really inseparable. And they just fundamentally, most of my colleagues don't see a problem with, for example, Dominion Energy, the regulated electric utility here, that has a monopoly license to do business through 70% of the Commonwealth. They don't see a problem with that monopoly directly funding the campaigns of members of the General Assembly, when we in the General Assembly are the ones who appoint people to the State Corporation Commission, which is the body that's supposed to regulate them. Right. But there's something ideological that it just doesn't click, that's obviously bad.
Well, people don't want to face their own demons.
Yeah.
That is mind-blowing. So the thing that I don't understand, though, is, Terry McAuliffe, prolific fundraiser, one of the best in like history, close to the Clintons, but former head of the DNC.
But not very good at getting people to show up to vote. When he won in 2013, it was a record low turnout year.
Interesting.
He raises a lot of money and does not get people excited.
Interesting. So that leads to my question is, how are these other establishment types, how do they have the courage to run against him? Because, it's different if you're progressive running against the establishment, but they usually make sure that the field's clear or maybe they will eventually, but is there some sort of dynamic happening that we're not aware of?
Well, he and I both entered the race fairly late. And when most of the rest of the field was declaring their candidacies, it was expected that he would get a job in the Biden administration. And so he's actually the one that sort of upset the plan by running for governor again. So, I do kind of feel bad for some of the more establishment aligned candidates who didn't expect to have him in the field and were operating as though he was not going to run again. And then all of a sudden, he jumps in with $6 million cash. If you're trying to play that big money game and a whale comes in after you, you're screwed through no fault of your own. But again, I'm not trying to play that big money game. I've never taken a single dime from any for-profit corporation or industry interest group. I never have. I'm the only one who's never received a contribution from a fossil fuel company. Even the other quote unquote progressive candidates have taken money from, for example, Washington Gas. Yeah. I'm the only candidate in the primary who's never taken money from organized police like the Virginia State Police Association. I'm the only candidate in the Democratic primary who's never taken money from big banks like Capital One. There's only me and one other candidate who have never taken money from big tobacco. So, I stand apart on the way that I'm actually running my campaign, but I also stand apart on issues. We had our first debate last night and Terry McAuliffe didn't show up, which was appalling.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was just the other four candidates.
Interesting.
But, we only had 60 seconds to talk about these issues, which when, like me, you're a candidate who approaches things in a fundamentally different way, like an ideologically different way. It's really hard to explain that massive difference in 60 seconds. But take, for example, we had a question about housing and the other candidate said, we need to extend the grace period for repayment before the landlord can file an eviction. We need to, put more money in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And then it gets to me and I say, we need rent control. We need good cause eviction laws. We need cooperative ownership of multifamily buildings. We need a vacancy tax for industrial land, or for commercial landlords that have a lot of off-market properties, and so on and so forth. And there's a real qualitative difference to the kinds of solutions that we're proposing. It's because they're proposing solutions that work within the existing framework, and I'm talking about the failures of the existing framework.
And it just seems like this is a moment, you talk about this in your opening video, these issues are connecting with voters that may not have even been open to them or understood that they're rooted in socialism or old progressive era policies that folks are trying to bring back. People are connecting the dots now. And that's what I'm really curious about, how folks that may be outside of your typical base, outside the progressive wing of the Democratic Party or independents, or others even, I mean, maybe they're even Republicans who align with some of these issues in Virginia. But I'm curious if you're noticing people that are outside of that ecosystem starting to understand, because of this economic crisis, because of COVID, the importance of having, Medicare for all or rent controls.
Yeah. 2 years ago, we forced the Republicans to expand Medicaid back when the Republicans still had a very narrow majority in the House of Delegates. And that was a huge victory, right? We went from 800,000 uninsured Virginians to 400,000. But because of the COVID-19 crisis, people losing their jobs, losing their health insurance, we're back up to 700,000 again.
Ooh.
We're almost in the same boat that we were in when we expanded Medicaid. And so a lot of people are realizing, holy crap, these tweaks to the existing system, trying to come into better compliance with the Affordable Care Act, it's not going to solve the problem. And they're starting to open up more to ideas like a state-run single payer plan to guarantee not access, not affordability, but healthcare. Right? The ability to see a doctor when you need it and to not have to worry about a bill at the end.
Right.
And when we're talking about, even just more basic sort of fundamental questions about the economy, one of the things that I've noticed a lot of leftists, a lot of socialists fall into, one of the traps they fall into, is using really academic language to talk about it. The bourgeoisie versus the proletariat and all that.
It's my pet peeve, Lee. I love that you're saying that. We try to do that on the show, eliminate it. It's right. Because it's when you're an organizer, you got to speak their language.
Yeah, but you can put the same concept into terms that people are much more familiar with and much more comfortable with. And so, when I'm talking about building a socialist economy in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I don't say it like that. What I say is, a couple years ago, we gave $1.8 billion to Amazon. Would you rather keep doing that? Or would you rather I use that $1.8 billion and give some of it to you so that you can start your own employee-owned business? That way, instead of having a boss making decisions for you, it's you and your coworkers making the decisions together. And it clicks just like that. Everybody knows they're getting ripped off at work. Everybody.
So let's actually go back to that for a second, because the Amazon fight was 2018 into 19. At the same time, they were setting up the headquarters, or attempting to set up the headquarters in Queens, where I live. They set up, was it a headquarters? I can't even remember now, in Virginia. It was another headquarters in Virginia, and you were a key part of that fight. Can you talk about that? What happened in Virginia?
Yeah, when they made their announcement, they were looking for a new headquarters. I said, this whole thing is a sham, right? They were trying to play cities off of each other to try to, get a bidding war going. But I called it right from the beginning. I said, it's either going to be New York so they can be close to Wall Street investors, or it's going to be Northern Virginia so they can be closer to the Pentagon and those sweet government contracts.
Yeah.
And what do you know? They said New York and Virginia. They really were just trying to extract public money out of both of our jurisdictions. And I was one of a small handful of people that opposed it. We only had 9 minutes worth of debate on the floor about whether or not to give them $1.8 billion in cash tax breaks and infrastructure. We're building an entirely new campus for Virginia Tech adjacent to their headquarters specifically for their workforce requirements. 9 minutes of debate. 9 minutes. And I had, even some very far right Republicans after that 9-minute debate, after they voted for the incentive package, came up to me afterwards. I remember this one guy, Tim Hugo. He came up to me in the lounge off the House floor, and he said, "You know what, Lee, I listened to what you're saying, and I think you're right. I think those people are screwed." I'm like, "Why the hell did you vote yes?" But it's another issue where I stand apart from the rest of the field because former Delegate Carol Foy voted for it. Senator McClellan voted for it. And then, Terry McAuliffe bragged about the role that he played in putting the deal together. And Lieutenant Governor Fairfax was part of the welcoming committee when they made the announcement. So I'm the only one running for governor on the Democratic side that opposed giving them $1.8 billion to do something they were already going to do anyway.
And have those jobs come?
They haven't come for the people that were here when we made the vote, right? So most of the positions that they've opened up so far have been filled with transfers.
Right.
So people moving in from Seattle, from Pennsylvania, from wherever, who already worked for Amazon, and they're just sort of crowding into the same housing stock that was already too expensive in Northern Virginia. Where I live, I'm about an hour away from the Amazon campus, but you heard the train whistle earlier. That rail line goes basically from my building to the Amazon campus every day. And so even though we're an hour away, the rent in my building went up 18% in a month after that announcement. Before a single shovel hit the ground, before a single person was hired, 18%.
That's so interesting because I remember, I live in Queens, and so that's where the deal was supposed to take place. And I remember saying at the time, it's not just a deal with Amazon and these supposed workers that are not going to be from the neighborhood. They're not going to be from New York, even though New York definitely has a skilled workforce for it. But simultaneously, we noticed that there was a rezoning around a councilman there, claims to be progressive. He was part of a rezoning effort there that went against the community board's interest. There's a way that we do this in New York. And as a result, all these high rises popped up. And sure enough, the neighborhood changed. It wasn't just about Amazon headquarters. It was these, expensive high rises that were being bought up and rented up by the workforce that was planning on coming to New York. And it was just as much a developer's deal as it was a bigger Amazon deal, which of course the money did not go to things like the subway and schools and all the things that are being underfunded through austerity in our city. Lee, we could talk for forever. I have so many more questions, so hopefully you can come on again soon. But if folks want to help you out in your campaign, if they want to contribute, if they want to, what are your most urgent needs right now?
We need people to give, and we need volunteers. If you can go to carterforvirginia.com, that's all one word. It's all spelled out. That website is available in 4 different languages: English, Spanish, Korean, and Vietnamese. You can see we have it up on the screen right now. There's a giant donate button in the top right. And there's a volunteer button a little bit to the left of that. 3 out of my 4 competitors in this primary have each cashed, individual checks for more than $100,000. Oh my biggest contribution so far has been $4,000. My average contribution is $41. We're doing this the hard way, but the hard way is the right way. And so I need all of your help. Every little bit counts. We have trimmed all of the fat out of a political campaign that you possibly can. We don't have any of these high paid consultants. We're not wasting money on 30, 40, 50 pieces of mail. We're not going to try to do more TV than Terry McAuliffe. It's all extremely targeted. We know who we're talking to. We're trying to get people out to vote who have never voted in a gubernatorial primary before. They are the cheapest people to reach, but they're the hardest people to convince. So we have the message, we have the movement, we have the momentum, especially coming off of the tremendously successful debate last night. But we need as many people as possible rowing in the same direction. So go to carterforvirginia.com, grab an oar, start rowing with me.
I love that. When's the primary?
The primary is June 8th. But
oh my gosh.
We have 45 days of early voting. and vote by mail. So
that starts
voting
when?
is starting very, very soon. I don't remember the exact first date.
45 days. All right. So
very, very soon.
Folks, volunteer, because, phone calls, I don't know what your field program is, but if you live in Virginia, around Virginia, in the Beltway, if you're willing to go to Virginia, go knock on some doors for Lee. That's important. That's a really key part of this is early voting.
Well, because of COVID, we're not directly sending volunteers out for face-to-face interactions, but phone banks, text banking in particular is a way to have a tremendous impact. We have a wonderful text banking system where you can talk to thousands of people in an hour. So by all means, please go to carterforvirginia.com, click that volunteer button and that donate button. We need all the help we can get. But if we can get across the finish line in June 8th, we'll be the odds-on favorite for November, and we can really transform this Commonwealth into a place where wealth is common, where everyone can live and work and not have to worry about how they're going to put food on the table, how they're going to make the rent, whether or not they can afford a doctor or put their kids through college, or whether or not they're going to be discriminated against based on who they are, who they love, or who they were born to be. The stakes in this election are huge, not just for Virginia, not just for the 8.5 million people that live here, but it will set tremendous precedent for the other 49 states as well. We can transform this country and we can make Virginia the first domino to fall.
I love it. And not to mention, you are a former vet. Let's add that to the mix too.
Yes.
I'm sorry I missed out on that. You're the only one, you're a veteran. You're the only one in the race that's a veteran as well. That's huge for Virginia.
At least on the Democratic side. Yeah. So Virginia is per capita the most military and veteran heavy state in the union.
Right.
And so, this is actually part of my argument for single payer healthcare here. A lot of people think, oh, Virginia is this conservative state, you're never going to get that. But it's like, no, we have the most military and veterans of any state in America. So we have the most people who have already been on a single payer government run healthcare plan and know that it's better. Right? You can call it Medicare for all. You can call it Medicaid for all. You can call it TRICARE for all if you're trying to reach a military audience.
Right.
I don't care. As long as we achieve universal coverage so that everyone can see a doctor and the bill is handled on the back end and you don't have to worry about anything.
Absolutely. Lee Carter, thank you for joining us. Delegate Lee Carter, go check out his campaign, go volunteer, give money if you can. If you have $1 million and you want to throw him $200,000 or $500,000, he can take it. As long as you're a good person.
I would feel a little bit weird about a check that size, but who
knows what rich socialists are watching our show.
If there's any class traders out there that just have it like that, I don't know. We'll take those on a case-by-case basis, I guess.
Deep interviews. Just kidding. Hey, if Ben and Jerry's wanted, I'm just throwing this out there. If Ben and Jerry's wanted to give you $500,000, would you take that corporate money?
No for-profit corporations whatsoever.
Great answer.
If,
Look at that.
If Ben and or Jerry wanted to give me money, sure. But Ben and Jerry's, absolutely not.
There you go. You'd be in the pocket of dairy or something. I don't know. of socialist ice cream. Lee, thank you for joining us. Definitely appreciate it. Hope you can come on after you win the primary, and we'll be celebrating.
Thank you so much for having me on. I do appreciate it.
Always. All right, everybody, we'll be back with our fantastic panel right after this brief little break. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. All right, guys. Speaking of Vermont and Ben and Jerry's, Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned company. No Monsanto, no big business. They're farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm to your door. Sunset Lake CBD has something for everybody. They offer tinctures, gummies, salves, which is helping me. I had this weird breakout on my arm the other day, and I was using it. It was great. Anyways, they have salves, coffee, fudge, all designed to help with stress, aches, and pains, and it works It was originally a dairy farm from the Ben & Jerry's, and they decided to diversify and grow premium hemp there. Customers, when they support Sunset Lake CBD, they are supporting sustainable agriculture that enhances rural communities and creates meaningful employment in the community. Their minimum wage is $15 an hour. And employees own the majority of the company, and they support independent media like the Nomiki Show and the David Pakman Show and, the Majority Report. I was just talking about the salve. I don't know, like I'm on my desk all day. I don't know how I get it, but I get these like little bumps from the desk. And so I put the salve on, and I swear to God, the next day it was better. I don't know what is in it, what happens, but I trust it. It's natural. I just ordered more tincture. I was out of it. So for the last 3 days, I have not been sleeping well. But when I do put that tincture in my water or my tea, I sleep like through the night, deep sleep, have vivid dreams. It's amazing. I know, Dorsey, you love the product as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the tincture too. I mean, everybody loves the gummies, it seems like, but
definitely.
Other than the gummies, the tincture is what works the best for me. Especially for like all my kind of like body aches and my ailments and stuff, instead of, using any kind of medication, over the counter stuff, I'll just go ahead and go with the tincture when I have it. So yeah, I can't wait to get some more of that. I actually have been behind on that. So I haven't been sleeping as well as I normally do because, it just kind of like loosens me up. I have a lot of like cricks and cracks in my back and my neck, and, it just makes sleeping so much easier when I have a couple drops of that.
I get migraines. I talk about this. I have a lot of ailments. We all have ailments. It's like once you go past 35, it's just like constantly trying to figure out how you're going to treat your ailments, especially if you're sitting all day. But I get migraines, and they've been happening more often lately. Maybe it has to do with computer time and COVID and stress. Who knows why? But they also have hemp, and I smoked some hemp, and it immediately. I know Dorsey's laughing at me about that.
I smoked the hemp.
No, but it's true. I definitely especially if I have a headache, as soon as I wake up in the morning, I can still work. But it definitely I don't know what it does to my brain, but it loosens me up.
I actually have some of it's like keef, which is kind of like the powdered remnants of like when I'm grinding the other stuff. Anyway, and I sprinkled it on some of the other stuff when I've been smoking it, and it's that's really nice. I just have been trying to cut back on smoking so much. That's why I'm all about the tincture and the gummies and stuff. Yeah. But when I do want to add a little bit of relaxation and stress-free, kind of like it gets rid of the anxiety part of smoking the other stuff, sprinkle a little bit of the keef on there. It's great, actually.
I love it. I did not know that. All right. Well, now we all know. So go check out Sunset Lake CBD at sunsetlakecbd.com. We have a promo code for 20% off of your entire order. You just type in NOMI, all capitals, NOMI. I'm sure they'd take it if it was lowercase too, but just put in promo code NOMI for 20% off of your entire order. sunsetlakecbd.com. We will be right back. Welcome back. It is Wednesday, and Wednesday means Jordan and Simon are here. Jordan Zakarin, he runs the Progressives Everywhere newsletter. Go check it out. It's a hot newsletter. I know. They profiled Matriarch. It was great. Got a lot of amazing responses from the Matriarch profile last week. It's Women's History Month, of course. So everybody at Matriarch was really grateful for that. Thank you for doing that. And Simon Narode, he is a former organizer for Bernie 2020, and he is part of Team TNS, the Nomiki Show. All right. This is a day that is, many of us woke up to news about the massacre that occurred in Georgia. And, information still coming in. It was targeted against the Asian American community. But let's play this video of Joe Biden and President Biden's response.
But whatever the motivation here, I know that Asian Americans are very concerned because, as you know, I've been speaking about the brutality against Asian Americans for the last couple months, and I think it is very, very troublesome. And but I'm making no connection at this moment to the motivation of the killer. I'm waiting for an answer from, as the investigation proceeds, from the FBI and from the Justice Department.
Here's the thing. He's talked about his motivations, but, you know, that required, I mean, many things can be true at the same time. And also, you know, psychologists, the FBI are not trying to figure out what the actual intent or motivation or deep-rooted motivation or deep-rooted bias. Why does it matter? That's what I want to know. Jordan, I mean, like, is any of this going to change the outcome of the events and the conversations and how it impacts society? I mean, there are absolutely racists out there who are going to see this event and feel empowered, are they not?
Yeah, there's a weird like guilty until proven innocent thing when it's white men who do a thing or do something wrong. And you know, when we talk about even like Andrew Cuomo, it's obviously very different. But you know, let the investigation happen. I mean, this guy went and killed 8 people, 8 Asian Americans, and now the latest is that he's quote unquote a sex addict who had a quote unquote bad day. Who's trying to get rid of all the temptation, but he still went and killed Asian women. You know, he lives in Atlanta. There's lots of other people. He went and killed specifically Asian women. And I don't know that like they're ever going to get like a note from him that said, I hate people who are of Asian descent. I don't think he's ever going to say, I did this because I hate Asians. So it's really frustrating when people can, you know, anytime a cop kills a person of color, they'll, you know, put out every single bad thing they ever did, every single parking ticket they ever did and said, look, this guy's a criminal. But they're trying to protect the reputation of a guy who went and murdered 8 Asian women who, you know, because he supposedly felt tempted by them. I don't know what other answer you need.
I mean, this is not just racism. Let's also discuss the disgusting misogyny. I mean, this is beyond misogyny. This is, we should be having that conversation as well about not just that women were being targeted in a workplace and with power dynamics that, you know, whether they were sex workers or not, they were workers that were not protected, but simultaneously he was acting out because they tempted him, he says. Simon, like...
Yeah, as you guys have pointed out, I mean, it's definitely a case of where, you know, a white man goes and kills a bunch of Asian women, and he's asked what his motivations were, rather than looking at the very like obvious, you know, racism, you know, white supremacy, misogyny, like anti-sex worker sentiment that's going on at play here, not just in the mind of the killer, but also in just like broader societal sort of attitudes. And all of that contributes to what we're seeing here. It's not, of course, it's not an isolated event. I think sometimes even calling it a hate crime, it does a bit to sort of isolate it as an individual case of someone who is, you know, mean or bad, doing something, rather than like a whole structural problem of the way that we treat Asian people in this country, the way that we treat sex workers in this country, the way that we treat women in this country. And all of that comes into play here, and is all stuff we should be discussing.
Well, what's really concerning to me is where do we go from here? If the FBI or the police or whoever is going to publish his intent, what he says his intent is, let's make that clear. And by the way, could very well be true. People are hearing that. There are men, I'm going to assume men, who are having these fantasies about women, who, I mean, it's hearing this story is it's traumatizing. I mean, I can't imagine what women are feeling. I mean, it's traumatic. And then the fear is whether it's copycats or other men who are going to see that and act it out. I mean, Why is there no more responsibility around this? Go ahead.
I just was going to say, I think you were touching on something like really big there. Is it's sort of I've heard like some like Asian women speaking out today about how like the hypersexualization of Asian women is sort of the beginnings of the sort of violence that that this can lead into. And yeah, so I mean, that's yet another piece that we should be discussing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jordan, if you were to go and Google his photo, like if you were to like say, hey, draw me a white nationalist, it would be this guy. So just looking at him, I don't think there's like a huge, I don't want to say like just by looking at him you can tell, but he fits the profile of even just what they said about him, like loner guy who was frustrated and angry, and so again, like I guess we can't officially declare one thing or another, but it's just so obvious that the environment that's been created by, frankly, and to make this political, like Republicans, and continue to do so, continue the tough on China talk, the last year of racism. And it's just like everything else, using racism, I guess, to block, to occupy the minds of people so they don't realize how badly everyone's being hurt and pillaged and ransacked, and being fine with it, this being the outcome. This is, blood on their hands. And I think one other thing real quick is that there's racism everywhere in every country. The United States is the one place where there's continuous mass shootings like this. And I think that, gun control got put on the back burner, I think, when Trump won. But the way people were arming up, especially this summer, the way white nationalists were arming up and, trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan and just finding stocks of guns, I think that's also an issue.
Well, we've had people on who study the rise of fascism and how these ecosystems brew and what's happening globally in these networks. And I mean, we have them here. We may not label them the same way they do abroad, but they're connected. They're internationally connected networks, and they are facilitated online. They invest and pump money and audiences into right-wing shows. But one thing that has been very clear, we have these experts on, and they've said it over and over, and is racism goes hand in hand with misogyny. It doesn't mean that misogyny can exist. Misogyny exists on the left, trust me. But racism and misogyny go hand in hand. And that Gretchen Whitmer instance, I think, was spot on. All right, let's in good news today, Representatives Jayapal.
Sorry to interrupt you, Nomiki. Actually, there was one more point that I really wanted to make about this. That I was, I know that one of the responses from Atlanta is to beefing up like the police presence at like businesses where there are a lot of like Asian employees and things like that. And I know that for a lot of people, maybe even some of our viewers, this sounds like really reassuring that the police are doing something about this. But as I've heard from Asian people who I know personally and from people like activists, and talking about how more police is never the solution to violence like this. The police did not keep people safe in this instance. It can be demonstrated even in the way that that cop from Atlanta was talking about how this guy had a really bad day and just basically playing PR for the shooter. Police are not the solution to this. And we really need to be looking at ways that we can keep our communities safe.
They took this guy peacefully and they killed George Floyd. I think that very clearly their priorities are not with the people of color that they're supposed to be protecting.
Exactly. Okay, so in good news, and hopefully it will be even better soon, Representatives Pramila Jayapal and Representative Debbie Dingell have reintroduced Medicare for All. Very exciting. Pramila Jayapal says we pay more per capita for healthcare than any other country in the world, yet leave more than 87 million people uninsured or underinsured. Today, I am reintroducing Medicare for All. It's time to guarantee healthcare to everyone as a human right. 87 million people in a country of 330 million people. Let that sink in. And I'm not even sure how accurate those numbers are to reflect the last year since the pandemic. All right, let's just play reality here. Do we see a path to victory? Do we see a path to garnering these votes, given the climate of the pandemic and the plans and the organizations and the support and the coalitions and all the things that come when you actually have to present a bill on the floor? Jordan.
I think we saw that. All right. So speaking of the American Rescue Plan, just start off with the basics. It provides 90% of Medicaid funding, over $1.6 billion to states, even more than that, and even bigger states. Texas, Wisconsin, all these other states still don't want to do it.
It's insane.
Alabama, Mississippi has
double
the worst
incentives too. Double incentives. It's insane. Yeah.
Mississippi has the worst health outcomes anywhere, and they just Governor Tate Reeves refused to do it. And so, I mean, that would ensure, I don't know, like 5, 10, 12 million more people. Again, not anywhere good enough. But I think what it says is that there is still this resistance from the right, and there needs to be pressure put on them to even accept this small modicum of help to allow these things to become a reality. I think that perhaps, voter suppression, getting rid of gerrymandering, putting these people at risk, putting their jobs at risk will open up a lot more avenues to getting something Medicare for all passed. I will say that, again, the rescue plan has money for COBRA, which is insane. Just put people on Medicare. But hopefully, in the same way that the child tax credit is hopefully going to be extended long term. I hope that the old saying that you can't take away a program from people, that proves true. And we get closer and closer to that sort of demand where people realize, oh, wow, I don't have to worry about healthcare or spend all my money on it every single month. That's great. And attitudes start to change. But I think until all these lawmakers who do not fear for 1 second for their jobs, until they start fearing for their jobs, that is going to become, that's when things might change.
I mean, Simon, sounds like a great strategy. All the coalition groups, all the people running against these candidates, get a bunch of nurses on the front lines, get a bunch of people who've been hooked up to respirators who had no health care, who have, families who've now dealt with their loved ones who have passed and have to deal with the costs of the healthcare costs from COVID. Put them in a bunch of ads and just say, your Republican representative is not supporting Medicare for all. He'd rather you pay out of pocket than the government, which has the money to do so. I mean, doesn't that seem like a path to victory right there?
I mean, I feel like the path to victory, I think, is quite complicated. It's going to need a lot of different pieces to come together, right? I mean, even if it does manage to pass like the House and Senate, there's always the problem of, Joe Biden said last year that he would veto Medicare for all if it landed on his desk, right? So much has happened since then. And, I am open to the possibility that Joe Biden may be in a very different position today, just considering the state of the country. And I would love to see that happen. I think that Pramila Jayapal and I'm sorry, who was the other representative?
Representative Dingell. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dingell. I think that they are starting from a really great position with a very aggressive bill with a 2-year rollout, which is what we always wanted Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All to be as well. So I think starting here, maybe they can even negotiate to a 4-year rollout or something like that. There's ways that they can move from this starting position. I think that it's really exciting, and I hope that it goes well.
Just a reminder that Secretary Clinton thought it was all ponies and rainbows. And I'd love to see that on a bumper sticker post-pandemic. All right. This one's fun because we just love to hate them. Mehdi Hassan, the host on MSNBC, talks to Stuart Stevens about his project, the Lincoln Project, and how much the founders made. Let's roll that clip.
But I do have to ask you about the Lincoln Project while I have you, which in recent weeks was rocked by allegations of a cover-up of sexual misconduct by one co-founder, side deals worth millions of dollars to its principals, plus a variety of other recriminations, accusations, departures, resignations. Last month, Kurt Bardella, who was a Lincoln Project advisor like you, tweeted, quote, "Just shut it down already. Wow. It's over." And another ex-advisor, Susan Del Percio, she told me on this show last week, well, have a listen to what she said.
The Lincoln Project, well, I don't know how it survives this. This reporting just shows how dysfunctional the Lincoln Project has become. The people at the top are disappointing, to say the very least, and I just hope they're not found to be criminals. Stewart,
your own former advisors are hoping you're not criminals and calling for you to be shut down. Where does that leave your organization?
Look, I couldn't disagree with that more. I think it's an absurd allegation. The Lincoln Project was the most successful super PAC in the history of America. These guys, and they wrote an op-ed and the movement showed up. They have millions of supporters. They have over 500,000 donors. They've had a tremendous impact in where we are now. And I think that this idea that somehow or another that you're expected the Lincoln Project to be something that would be like a perfect organization is unrealistic. This is an organization that had 10 people at the end of May.
Oh, come on, Stewart. Stewart, come on. There's a big difference between being a perfect organization and what the accusations, very serious accusations, that have been leveled against the Lincoln Project. You know that.
Let me talk, please. There is a report that's being investigated about what happened with John Weaver. I think that taking that step shows that they believe in transparency. Let's see what that report says. But the Lincoln Project is something that is bigger than any one individual. It is really something that has become a movement, that is a pro-democratic movement. And look, there's a lot of people that never liked the Lincoln Project, never liked the way we operated. The fact that we didn't spend, believe that millions and millions more dollars spent on advertising in one market would make the difference. We believed in asymmetrical warfare. We destabilized the President of the United States' campaign. I think that what we did, the effectiveness of it speaks for itself.
Okay.
And that's going to continue.
All right. So I have a theory. I'm going to throw it out there. I'm not saying what happened is like, listen, many of these political institutions, once you pull back the curtain, you'll see that they're not the best people in the world. Not every, but many of them.
Politicians are not the best people in the world.
They're not unique, but I remember right after the election, people were worried that these Republicans were essentially taking Democratic data and we're going to move it into maybe a revival of like the centrist Republican movement to kind of fight off Trumpism. I'm not sure where this all came from. And of course, these allegations are very real. But I feel like this is the death of that like revival of the centrist Republican, whatever it was. Jordan, what are your thoughts?
I'll say this, the reason I hated the Lincoln Project, it wasn't because of their annoying ads. It was because it made it so much harder to raise money for actual progressive candidates. They're welcome to go do their ads and, be smug on TV, whatever they want to do. I mean, they shouldn't be harassing people or stealing money, but they made it so much harder. And I do that with the newsletter every week. I did it, with candidates all the time. I'm now working with the candidate for Senate. It's so much harder to raise money when they make these slick ads because they know what they're doing. They helped George Bush's campaign hoodwink people twice. So that's what I really hate them for. They made it so much more difficult. They raised $80 million or something like that. I mean, they stole like a quarter of it at least, but they raised like $80 million that could have gone to Democratic and progressive candidates had people just really realized. And the problem is, you see Mehdi Hasan, who is, did a good job grilling him there, but those people, Steve Schmidt's on MSNBC all the time. They are being platformed by plenty of big corporate media organizations that gave them that opportunity to do so. They didn't just appear, they were given all the opportunity in the world. And so my bone to pick with them, other than, them enabling a sexual harasser or worse, is the fact that they debilitated in a lot of ways a lot of Democratic campaigns and progressive organizations.
And they're not the only ones. There are other groups that are modeled similarly, doing the same thing. And you sit there and you say, I mean, I'm part of an organization that is involved in fundraising. I've run on, worked on campaigns and had my own campaign. It is so hard to build these lists, as you know, Jordan. It is so hard. It requires so much money up front and the right messaging and targeting. And you have to have the consultants who know how to do that and like all this stuff. And they just swooped in. I mean, it was.
And a lot of people on Twitter, the internet, were saying, well, they're fighting Trump, it's fine with me. Because there's this this inability to realize that there's other parts of the country and there's other races that need to be won. And, Republicans voted for Trump more than they did in 2016. So I don't know how much they were helping getting, maybe independent voters, good Democrat, but they debilitated the rest of it wasn't just them. There's a lot of mistakes made by Democrats, but, they did not help matters. That's for sure.
Simon,
yeah.
Is this the end of the Lincoln Project?
Well, fingers crossed, right? I love how he was demonstrating they were the most effective super PAC ever or something like that by saying how many donors they had or how many donations they'd received, when it's like, okay, well, that maybe is a sign of a very successful grift, but I don't know.
I don't know what else to tell me. Successful ever for whom?
I think that it's I really feel like I'm mad at the Lincoln Project, obviously, but I can't, it's like, if it weren't them, it would be someone else. There's always going to be someone who's grifting. And I think I'm more mad at the media and just the broader political space for saying that being anti-Trump was the only thing. Like that was the benchmark for like good politics, and it allows the Lincoln Project to show up, and that's their only thing. And a lot of people just jumped on board and handed over their money to something they got no returns from.
I mean, my Republican family members who voted for Biden didn't do it because of the Lincoln Project. So just if that was the strategy, like Biden was the anti-Trump, I think any Democrat that would have won, maybe with the exception of Bernie, my family would have voted for my Republican family members, which is a whole other boondoggle that we can talk about. But Jordan, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, Simon's right in the sense that it would have been someone else. And I think there's a lot of education to be done on the left maybe not on the left, but with Democratic voters who realize like the enemy of your enemy doesn't have to be invited over to steal from your house. You can say, hey, good luck. Thanks. We appreciate that. Let us know. But they did a lot of these just commercials that were just so soothing to, resistance liberals that they felt like made them feel smart, made them feel like they were superior. And it raised so much money, and it was like a real status symbol. We got Republicans on our side because it's an inferiority complex, I think, for people who are mainstream Democrats. So it's
hopefully this ends. Last, I couldn't do a show without touching on Andrew Cuomo, Governor Cuomo. I said last week, I think it was this day last week, that if Senator Gillibrand and Senator Schumer spoke out, and Joe Biden said he needs to step down, then he would step down. Since then, Senator Schumer and Gillibrand, of course, which have different constituencies, then it's a complicated dynamic, right? They have called for Governor Cuomo to step down. There have been more allegations, since then. President Biden has said that if there is criminal, you can put that up on the screen. If there is criminal conduct, the investigation proves that there's criminal conduct, then yes, he should step down. Let's play that clip.
Let me ask you about Governor Cuomo of New York. I know you've said you want the investigation to continue. If the investigation confirms the claims of the women, should he resign?
Yes, I think he probably end up being prosecuted too.
But how about right now? You've said you want the investigation to continue. You saw Chuck Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, majority of the congressional delegation don't think he can be an effective governor right now. Can he serve effectively?
Well, that's a judgment for them to make about their state where they can be effective. Here's my position. It's been my position since I wrote the Violence Against Women Act. A woman should be presumed to telling the truth and should not be scapegoated and become victimized by her coming forward, number one. But there should be an investigation to determine whether what she says is true. That's what's going on now.
And you've been very clear. If the investigation confirms the claims, he's gone.
That's what I think happens. And by the way, it may very well be that there could be a criminal prosecution that is attached to it. I just don't know. But let the investigation. And I don't know what it is. But I start with the presumption. It takes a lot of courage for women to come forward. Some are not. Anyway. It takes a lot of courage to come forward. So the presumption is it should be taken seriously and it should be investigated. And that's what's underway now.
So hang on one second. Before let's just play out how this normally goes down. My guess is President Biden, who has a very good and strong relationship with Governor Cuomo, probably called up Governor Cuomo and said, let's have a talk. If you are not planning on stepping, I have to say something. I'm going to be asked. We are being asked. So I'm going to give you the heads up that I'm going to say, and I bet you that the terms were negotiated to that. And my guess is Biden also went a little bit further, saying, yeah, he's probably there's a little bit of a gaffe there too. But that's how that usually goes down. You don't just, if you're that high up, you're not going to like completely come out and with your friends, somebody who helped you win multiple, he campaigned for him, very hardcore. Jordan, you're a New Yorker.
Yes.
You've been writing about this, thinking about this, talking about this. What are your thoughts?
Well, what I can't imagine is an investigation come back that says he didn't do it. I mean, he's admitted to it. There's text messages. There's so many people quotes. There's so many people who came forward. The investigation is only going to make it worse. They're going to only turn up more things. And so if he wants to wait until then, there's not going to be, oh yeah, those 5 of the 7 women were just kidding. They were making it up. And so I don't know why an investigation, other than maybe buying him time and hoping that the public moves on, that's not going to be good for him. In terms of support from Biden, you're right. He did go hard to the mat for Biden, but I don't think it's for Biden. I don't think it serves Biden any advantage to protect Andrew Cuomo at this point. Like, there's no big constituency. He won't be pissing off the left. He certainly won't be pissing off most of the Democratic Party. He's not going out on a limb and going over Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand's head. You got to remember Chuck's Joe Biden also had his own little, not exactly the same, but kind of kerfuffle about the way he spoke to or touched women. And so he has to be very serious about that as well. If he started defending Cuomo, I think people might bring up his own past.
In the end, though, that was still defense. Let the investigation play out. And Simon, you've been watching the show, obviously, and I've talked about how we're also in the middle of budget time. And so the undercurrent of all this is, I have a theory that a good chunk of Albany, even people who have called for him to step down, don't actually want him to step down if he steps down until after the budget is negotiated. Not because they don't, of course, I think like ideally a lot of Democrats don't want to deal with Governor Cuomo in budget negotiations, but like in the midst of it would send Albany into absolute chaos. And so you have Carl Hastie, the Assembly Speaker, who said, okay, we're putting together the impeachment proceedings. There's 2 investigations in Attorney General Tish James's office, one for the nursing home scandal and one for the sexual harassment and assault allegations. But at the end of the day, he still might step down because like the process might give cover to Albany and the budgetary stuff. But he still might have to step down. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Just throwing out some conspiracy theories here.
I love your theories. I always feel like I want to defer to you when it comes to specifically New York politics and Andrew Cuomo, and what might be going on behind the scenes there. What I can speak to is like the moral standard that I feel like we ought to hold the president to, which is, we should see the president as sort of being, I don't fully believe this, but I know that the idea is that the president ought to be like the moral compass for the country, right? Or ought to be taking strong moral stances on important moral issues like the one that we're seeing right now with Andrew Cuomo. And this is, and Joe Biden seems to, not just only in this case, for the reasons that you have just brought up, but I think also in a lot of other things, Joe Biden just seems to be like, oh, well, that's for them to decide, or, that's for so-and-so to say, or like, we're just going to wait and see what comes out of this. He is refusing to take a stance at a time when people really need him to be, right? A lot of women who are, victims of sexual harassment in their workplaces and things like that would really be looking to our president right now to stand in defiance of Andrew Cuomo and stand with the people who are accusing him. So we're not seeing that. And I think that is regardless of everything that is probably actually going on, that's what I would like to be seeing. And that's sort of frustration I have with Biden.
It's an old tactic that, if you want to kill something, take it to a committee, put it through more process, right, Jordan?
Yeah, of course. When I said I think Biden came in hard on him, to me it was like he was sending him down the plank. There's not going to be a world in which he and Cuomo comes out clean on this, and I think it'll be sooner rather than later. So yeah, I think that I would have liked Biden to say, yeah, he needs to resign. I think that there is definitely going to be, the investigation, and I don't think Tish James really likes Andrew Cuomo. Tish James, of course, she
owes her position to him.
She does, but she was always a Working Families Party person. I don't think she probably sees her. I don't know. I think she split. Yeah, of course. Before that, though, yeah. I just think that I wish Biden had come out in favor of him resigning. I think that eventually he will have to walk the plank, and I think that when you talk about the state government, I think you might be right in the sense that some people don't want to force him to resign. They don't actually want him to resign. He's been so obnoxious and difficult when it comes to the budget. Perhaps he's going to try and be a little more giving and see if they can get their support. So I can imagine just pure politically, in terms of funding, in terms of taxes, in terms of, lots of other stuff. I can imagine the legislature hanging this over Cuomo's head for once. Finally, they have some power and making life difficult for him, and then
be done with him.
Yes.
And then exactly, it's kind of, it's so poetic. Having for the last decade, at least, he's obviously been involved in politics since he managed his father's mayoral race when he was in his late 20s. The man is difficult. Loyalty is earned. It is not through fear and hate. If there's one leadership lesson, that's the one you stick with, right?
They say it's better to be feared than liked, but the thing is, like, when the fear is gone and everyone thinks you're an asshole, then you're in trouble.
That's it. All right, everybody. Thank you for sticking around for an extra long show. This was fun. And for giving in on my I wanted to talk about Cuomo with Jordan because you've been talking. I'm like, we've got to talk.
No, I'm always happy to talk about it. I don't want to, like gloat or revel in it because a lot of women were hurt in what happened, but to see him go down will be a sweet day whenever it does happen.
Yes, it's going to be an interesting day. And Kathy Hochul, who I grew up around in Buffalo, New York, she represented in the district I grew up in. She's our congresswoman and she was comptroller. So anyways, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well. Jordan Zakarin, Simon Narode, thanks for joining us. Let's do some shout outs. Look at these shout outs we have. Thank you to, oh goodness, guys, Chai Bureaucrat. Got it. Chai Bureaucrat. For all the cheer on Twitch. Thank you. I love it. Riley Cool says, hey, Nomiki, Matt Bender put up a new scandal regarding Cuomo, a serious one, an upstate town water crisis. Look on Bender's YouTube channel. Note from this. Okay, got it. So this was an old scandal. Blake Zeff is fantastic. He has definitely faced the wrath of Andrew Cuomo. Blake Zeff has done a lot of work around worked as a reporter covering Andrew Cuomo. Go check that out if you have a chance, but it is from 2016. Thank you to Professor Harvey K, who's mixing it up in the live chats as usual. He will be on the show on Thursday. That's tomorrow. We have a lot to talk about. It'll be exciting. We're going to compare Joe Biden to FDR because the Joe Biden administration thinks that he's better than FDR already. I don't know. I feel like we have a debate there. All right. He's going to join us tomorrow. So check us out tomorrow. And thank you to MIDI Docs and Mario for working those algorithms. Huge thank you to Bob C. Choke in the Orb and Chuck Diesel in YouTube as our moderators. We need those moderators. Always so grateful for moderators. And over at Twitch, A Difficult Truth, Dorian Sapiens, Our Means, Nug Wrangler, and Dorsey's fave. It's not his fave. I'm just joking. Nightbot, who is, I guess, a bot. I don't know. I'm really confused now. Thank you guys. We will see you tomorrow. Stay in solidarity. Same time, same place.